Yes, we want to know, Sharon.
One day we're going to find out. One day we're going to find out, and they're going to tell us.
Maybe I don't know that they'll uncover like what's in Area 51, and it's going to be boring. It's probably like it's all this time. It's just been another IRS facility. They're just doing paperwork there, doing taxes.
True. Well, good morning. And welcome to the latest episode of the Project Failure Files, the series for anyone who manages people, projects, or processes for a living. I'm Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And I am Christian Buckley, founder of Collab Talk, and welcome to another episode of our series where Sharon and I explore project management topics from the perspective of what not to do as you manage projects. In each episode, we talk about the common pitfalls, share personal stories and experiences, and this is a good one for this topic today, and explore strategies and best practices to help you to be successful.
So in this episode, we're talking about forgetting to cover your bases.
Yes, it's almost the acronym, Sharon. It's CYA, cover your assets.
Well, yeah, that's definitely a nicer way of putting it. It is unfortunately sometimes, usually in a really low trust environment, that blame shifting and finger pointing happen when things don't really go according to plan. And some people won't take accountability. That's why it's really important to maintain very clear documentation and email chains or some level of written form of communication to keep track of important decisions, approvals, and leadership directions, like whatever's happening, make sure it's written down somewhere.
You know, Sharon, I have some very specific stories. Like it just stands out in my memory of this topic. So it'd be good to get into it. I've always treated, though, I mean, you know this, I always use the word clinical. So I've treated project management function as almost like this, like an unbiased reporter. I'm there to collect and report on the facts of the project. So when I use the word clinical, I'm talking about like your approach. Like you'd be like a doctor talking to a patient. You can't just be like touchy-feely beating around the bushes about the fact that you've got cancer. You know, you need to remove the emotion, manage the project, identify what and when your stakeholders need to make an informed decision, and then document their decisions.
Yeah. Another reason why I really love following some sort of structured methodology is that there's clear reporting mechanisms, clear processes, everything's very well defined. You know, even in Agile, we have the ceremonies where we know, what's going to happen and when. I feel like this really builds trust with all the project stakeholders, the members of the team, anybody that's participating, that they're going to get the right information at the right time. And they're going to be able to know what to do to move forward because as long as everybody's doing their part and what's going on and everything's clear and all the communication is happening, I feel like people feel more empowered to do the things that they need to do in their own roles.
Oh, if only we lived in that world, Sharon. What color are the clouds in that world? I wonder.
Hang on, let me grab my rose-colored glasses. They're sitting over here somewhere.
Yeah, it should be a great conversation. Again, as always, as with every episode, please feel free to comment throughout the episode, share your experiences, any great examples or feedback that we may have missed. If we don't talk about it during, we'll definitely follow up with your comments after we get done recording. And I do like to, I should bring up the brand here too, is make sure that if you are not already signed up for the newsletter, go to projectfailurefiles.com and sign up. You can leave us a note here, say something nice, say something mean. It doesn't matter. Our feelings, they'll be hurt, but it's okay. We'll get over it. But sign up for the newsletter.
Yeah. So let's get started and define the problem. I suppose the first question is, how do you even know if this kind of self-preservation is even necessary? And I mean, I have a little bit of a personal story on this one.
Yeah.
When I was very, very young, brand new in the software development world, I was lucky enough, honestly, to work on a team where I always joke that it's me and 30 dudes. Well, in this case, there was one other woman. That was me, another woman, and 60 dudes. So it was nice enough to have another woman on the team early on. And I remember coming into the organization, and the very first thing she told me is, she's like, "Hey, I want to take you out to lunch, celebrate you kind of being in this role." And she was a peer. She was in a completely different team, but she's like, "I want to talk to you. Check me out to lunch." And she was like, "Here's the deal. You need to write down everything. You need to log everything. You need to keep track of your hours. You need to make sure you copy everything on an email. If somebody tells you to do something, respond and say, hey, I've got this in email, right? She literally sat me down and said, you need to CYA for every single thing you do in this role, because while it's an okay place to work, I can honestly tell you that I have had these experiences where, these things come up, and it's really sad that that happened to me so early on, but I do appreciate that she took the time to say, here's that you need to do it, and here's how to do it, and taught me some really good ways of being able to manage that early on. But I don't know that I would have known that that was necessary had somebody not taken me aside and told me this is necessary, which really, guys, should be a red flag.
Yeah. Well, and I'll get into some similar stories here too, but you think about this, like, what's your first indication? I think it's like what you said is, I've always tried to do this when I've worked at a place, worked at a company, somebody new comes on that's in a peer role, or even, a direct report to me, and let them know, it's like, look, this is the kind of the lay of the land. Here's the culture of the organization. So same thing. I've worked at a couple places where I've had people come over and say, hey, this is a very blame heavy workplace, or this manager, or if you're working with this client internally, this stakeholder, just be aware that, this is just kind of their modus operandi. It's like, this is how they usually, if things go south, they will deny that this person will ever, made that decision. And so you have things that are, the frequent finger pointing, the lack of ownership from these folks. Sometimes it's messy because of unclear roles and responsibilities. That can lead to confusion. We've talked about that in other episodes. So if there's no true ownership, because it's unclear where the ownership is, I wouldn't even necessarily call that a toxic environment around that. It just could be that's just sloppiness leads to problems. It adds risk. But when when I think of this, define this space, I think of it as, low trust organization where there are some bad seeds that do this, and it's like known that they do this. So I too, early on, I would say before I started my tech career, for a couple of years, I was a runner for a law firm. So when I was 19, went to work for this little mid-size Sacramento area law firm, and enjoyed most of the people there. But I was warned by the office manager, gave me kind of the personality rundown and said, watch your step with these attorneys, with these secretaries, that they would do if they made a mistake, like you would be the finger pointed. So make it very clear. And I learned that lesson a little bit, and yet still ran into it and had problems later when I went to work for consulting company. It was pretty clear, and then to Pacific Bell, where I started to get again that mix of personalities, and started to understand there are some people, why doesn't anybody like working with that director over in that area? Here's why. So you usually spot it, but it's great when somebody comes forward that's been there a while and talks to you and can let you in on what to avoid, what landmines are there.
I think it shifts good employees too. So when we talk about failure files, I mean, like when you allow that to persist, you allow, kind of that dysfunction, and I'm not even going to call it toxicity. I'm going to call it dysfunction. When dysfunction is there, it leads to a dysfunctional culture. And instead of forcing people to live up to, a certain level of expectations, what ends up happening is it becomes very siloed, right? Different people, we do it all these different ways, and we're unwilling to work. We're unwilling to collaborate. We're unwilling to sit at the same table together. We're unwilling to get past our problems. And what happens is, all of a sudden, nobody trusts anybody. Everybody's doing their own thing. They're all playing their own game. And ultimately, this whole idea of CYA just gets out of control because you're constantly like, well, who said what to who and why and when, and how do I even know what's real anymore? And I mean, this, this really turns into like a giant game of gaslighting.
Well, what usually comes out of that, low trust usually builds bureaucracy. And so if you
100%.
if you're finding it like the overly detailed, unnecessary approval processes, there's constant risk avoidance. Like, yeah, but if we had higher trust and sometimes rooting out those bad seeds, like again, I'm thinking of a couple experiences that I've had around this, and folks in the future, and I think we have 2 or 3 weeks, we actually are going to address the topic of bad managers. So that's a whole nother thing. But where it was known that they were like this. And so thankfully I had some leadership that understood this problem in the middle, this senior leader that couldn't take accountability for things. They understood that, and they gave a little extra room around the edges there. But it's because that person that's a problem, they might be toxic, but they deliver in whatever they're doing, their main area. Like for this one that I'm thinking of, like sales, this guy could sell anything to anyone. He was just a jerk on the back end. It's one of those people, like super nice to your face, but I imagine that he's incredibly rude to waiters. It's like
I just read an article about this. I literally just read an article about this like yesterday. It was talking about, there's people who deliver and have low EQ. There's people who have high EQ and can't deliver. And then there's, people who can't do either. And then there's people who do both. And this is that whole idea of, when you're dealing with people, sometimes we permit things to exist because they're high deliver that they deliver at their job, but they don't deliver in the EQ space. And so you end up having to do the CYA move a lot because they're doing their job, but they're not really maybe being, maybe they don't have integrity behind the scenes, or maybe they're not communicating well, or maybe they're not managing their own area well. And it becomes definitely this kind of chase of trying to keep up with them.
Yeah. I mean, what have you seen? What's the impact of having to constantly, besides it's almost like double entry accounting. So you're having to go back, make sure that everything's covered. Do I have agreements on this? It was to a point as part of talking about methodology, having structure, which helps a lot of this, but it's also more bureaucracy, things around it, is where on some decisions, I've done this at a couple of companies, and as a consultant, I did this, but I would actually make them give me a physical signature. Mm-hmm. Here's the plan. Here's what it is. You agree? Yes, I agree. All right, sign right there. I'm not going to sign that. I need to go through legal. I said, okay, well, let me know when it's signed. We'll pass it through. I'm not moving forward until that's done. And, then they complained about that. If they're fighting and angry and spending more time fighting you on signing that agreement, putting their name to, yes, take these steps, this is what I agree to, there's a red flag for you.
Yeah. I definitely think, like you mentioned, I think it brings a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of bloat, which we've talked about in past episodes. Just the idea of it adds processes, and it adds approvals, and it adds pieces of things that don't have to be there if you can just trust people to do what they say they're going to do and have the integrity to honor, whatever commitments they make. Or communicate with you. It's that idea of, letting me know if you are going to do it, letting me know if you're not going to do it. Like, this isn't rocket science, right? It's just communicating and letting people know what you are or are not going to do. But I definitely think, like you said, there's this double entry, because basically what ends up happening is, if I don't trust this over here, then now I'm going to create a scorecard, or I'm going to create a checklist on the other side for myself to make sure, did it get done or did it not get done? Because I don't trust that what they're telling me is accurate. Or because if I do something, I don't know that they're going to tell somebody that I did do that. And I can't tell you how many situations I've been in where I've ended up doing things that later on I find out that somebody either took credit for my work, or didn't pass on the information, or didn't communicate properly, and then ended up throwing me under the bus because they're like, oh, well, this comes back to Sharon because she didn't XYZ, or she said XYZ. And I'm like, guys, like, that's not really what happened. I mean, maybe close to that, but you kind of twisted the situation a little bit to where you shifted the blame off of you and back to somebody else. So I think, more than the extra work and the bureaucracy and the bloat, it can also create a lot of hurt feelings. It can create a lot of relationship issues. It can create a lot of, where you kind of think less of yourself. So, damage your self-confidence. So it creates, this is where we start putting our line into that toxic workplace, is because the minute that you're damaging people's reputation, self-confidence, or feelings is the minute that I feel like it goes from dysfunction into toxicity.
Yeah. Well, I think again, having a structured approach can go a long way. And again, it's CYA, so you're protecting yourself, but you're also starting to establish, again, by having that repeatable process. People know what to expect. You're going to slowly build trust. Now, the people that abuse that, that are constantly trying to shift accountability for those things, they won't like it, but everybody around it will appreciate that. And so it ensures that, okay, there's alignment. We've got roles and responsibilities. There's clarity around the expectations for that. You then have something that you can actually go back through and audit the records of approvals and key decisions. Like I always talk about that 4-quadrant, 1-page status. One quadrant is like what are the blockers? Where do you need decisions made? And so you've got documented right there, like waiting for approval from person, X. And then I can go and say, here's the email. Here's where we had the discussion. So this is, I'll shorten it dramatically, but I won't go into all the backstory. But again, working when I was at Microsoft, there was a director that was very difficult. He was really good at what he did. And a lot of the type A personality people, he loved him on that side. But on the back end, he was all over the place and unstructured and never accountable. And early on, I saw somebody that I knew and trusted highly, that he kind of threw him under the bus. Somebody over another part of the department, and I was taking over some of these projects from him. And he's like a soft-spoken guy, so I think this director felt it was easy to trample. And so I just made sure that I documented this stuff. So I would have a conversation. He would come by the office and have a conversation, thus avoiding answering the email where I wanted to document that. And so he would do that, and I learned the lesson. And so he'd walk away, and then I'd shoot him an email. And one time, it's just so beautiful too, he came over. I knew exactly what he was doing. He came over. I sent him an email. He came over across, was not on the way for him for anything. Came over to my office, have a conversation. Yeah, we want to move forward on this quickly. I'm like, awesome. Okay, thank you. And then I responded immediately, probably before he even got back to his office. I said, all right, so you want me to move forward to this just to prove it here? Like that. He walked back again. He's like, what's going on? We just had this conversation. This doesn't make any sense. I'm like, awesome. So I, just respond to that, because I need to forward it to a few people and other things. So I kind of talked him around it got him to respond back. So later in the project, was actually sitting in with the VP, all of the directors and all the PMs, all the managers that own these decisions as we're going through. And the VP wasn't like angry about the decision to move forward, just asked about it. He interpreted it as, okay, this is not good. So he immediately threw me under the bus. I never made that decision. And I'm like, no, actually, yeah, I've got it. Here's, if you want me to forward the email. The VP said, yeah, could you forward that over to me? It was beautiful to have that there. So, I mean, part of it is maintaining that paper trail. Follow up those verbal communications with email summaries of those things. Keep records of the minutes of what decisions were made, which is with AI tools, so much easier to go in and do. And then being as transparent, it also means that you can't hide in the shadows yourself with this documentation. Put it out there. I mean, that's one of the reasons we both use Microsoft Teams. having channel conversations where everybody on the project sees it versus that one-on-one chat where it's hidden in the shadows. So make sure that you're putting the notes, posting things where everybody sees those things. You mention the person. There's zero chance that they could miss the fact that it's documented out there in the public. And it kind of forces people's hand to do the right thing.
Yeah, it makes me think. I'm just sitting here thinking about like all the different like really cool stories. But I was thinking there was a situation I had a long time ago when I was managing a SharePoint practice, and one of my stakeholders didn't really understand how to use SharePoint very well, and she kept accidentally deleting things. And I at one point got a complaint back to my leadership that I had messed up or deleted some of her documents. And what was really interesting is, so they came to my desk and they're like, hey, we're getting, this concern that, you did something wrong. And I was like, no. And they were like, well, we need you to, to prove it. Right. And I'm like, okay. I mean, not that they were like, we believe you probably didn't do anything, but is there any proof? I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I have everything audited. So I pulled the audit report, and sure enough,
yeah,
this day, this time, that person's name, this day, this time, that person's name, not my name, their name. And so I pulled the entire report and I sent it over. They were like, I see. And then, went and talked to him. But, this goes to prove, like, I didn't have to like go through and do anything specific, but because I had backup measures in place to be able to audit everybody's work, not just my work, but everybody's work, when there was something that got brought up, I was then able to pull a report and prove, hey, this is actually the reality of what happened. Yeah. And, it went down the right road. But I think there's always just a benefit in, to your point, it's not about too much documentation. It is make sure that you have something in place to, in a written way, prove whatever happened so that you can at least defend your point.
And I think that the point too there is that we started a bit doom and gloom on this, but it really is make sure the structure is there, because most of the time when you're going back and looking at that, and it's not like this intentional trying to scuttle your career here. Somebody is like going back and looking through, hey, we need to see this. Like, what decision did we make here that kind of led us to this? It might be that you're going back through as part of a risk mitigation or documentation, or it could even be for like insurance purposes, to go back through and understand that auditability of the system. That again, the problem is if everything's verbal, if there is no documentation, you can't then audit that process. That's a problem. And so it's why I'm also an advocate for whether we're having, a one-on-one or we're, anything that is your company intellectual property, a meeting that you're having, a discussion, record the meetings, have it in 100%. The web meeting for 1 month, have that running, you run the AI, it's easier to go back and search for things, but it also captures that kind of information. It protects everybody. And I said, more than protects people, it then helps you remember and capture all of the decisions that were made and document all of that. So and then the other half of this is that you need to stand up for yourself. And if you're clinical about it, you don't have to be accusatory, like, hey, you're throwing me under the bus for this, like get emotion, remove the emotion, get back to clinical. Say, here's what was done. Here's the plan. Here's what we were moving towards. This was the plan of record. You made this decision. Here's your authorization. Here's the document of the meeting that we had where this was discussed. You said, yes, move forward. You have that. It removes the emotion and you can focus on now the plan.
Yeah. I mean, this is, you and I talk about governance constantly and the importance of governance. And, this right here, what to do wrong. This is why governance is such a big topic, because the idea of governance is already deciding what decisions are going to be made, right? It's sitting down and it's basically pre-deciding What decisions do we want to make? Why do we want to make them? Why are we doing the things that we're doing? Everything is documented. Everything is understood, so that when this type of stuff comes up,
the post-decision, the pre-planning post-decision.
Yeah, you already know what it is that you're going to do, and you already are prepared to then go back and say, well, we already made these decisions and here's why. And I do agree. I do think it's good to stand up for the things that you've already decided. And I'll tell you what, there is one thing that bugs me. And
just one.
There's only one. No, there's a lot of things. But in this particular topic, the thing that bothers me the most, and when I talk about integrity and accountability, it is when people make a decision or people bring up a topic and then we do that, and then afterwards they're like, oh, well, I didn't agree to that, or I didn't want to do that, or I had a different opinion. And you go back to the notes and you're like, no, this is the decision that we made. So part of standing your ground isn't even standing up for yourself, it's standing up for the decision itself. And if you as a group made a decision, or if a committee made a decision, it's the committee or the group's responsibility to be accountable for that decision.
Well, another thing to think about this too is that I just had this pop into my mind, but if you are in an organization where there is such fear around making a mistake because you're going to punish, they're going to do it, you'll go, like, there'll be a witch hunt, we'll go after the person and it'll damage their career. It's like, look, decisions are made sometimes with the information you have, the data that you've gathered. And so again, you can't be so tough on, it's like, okay, this was organizationally, we made the best decision. We thought it was the right decision. It ended up not being the right decision. All right, here's how we go and move forward. So actually, I had a very similar discussion to this with a couple leaders where I was then criticized for being too optimistic. I said, optimistic? I said, I'm being realistic. The project decision was made by the committee. We agreed. It didn't turn out the way that we had hoped. Things went wrong. Like every risk happened. Here's how we move forward from this. Here are now our options. How is that optimistic? It's realistic.
There's all that toxic positivity, Christian.
Right. There we go. Toxic positivity. Yeah. But again, you should defend yourself and say, that's why it's another blessing to have the process. It's why you and I say all the time, I don't care what methodology you use, just have a methodology, have this structure. So it removes the emotion. It removes the mistakes of unclear. If you follow that structure, you've got the documents, you've got the decision-making, you've got the ownership and accountability, the roles and responsibilities are defined, those basic things. It doesn't have to be heavy-handed. You apply what makes sense, but documenting decisions, the project plan, moving towards that, getting together on a regular basis, being transparent about the plan, the roles, accountabilities, and decisions made, that is non-negotiable. That's in every project, whether it's a 2-day project or a 2-year project, you have those components.
I think you and I are both big fans of the fail fast, fail forward, fail fast, fail often. But the second side to this is, fail forward, fail fast, fail often. Also learn the lesson.
From it. Yeah. Learn from it. Yeah, you can't forget that part. It's more useful, I think, when you learn from it and then not repeat. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. And I think, once you're doing that, the really nice thing is if you've got a culture where you feel like I'm going to do the best I can with what I have, but I'm going to take a small risk because I know that if I do this risk, I might get something bigger or better out of it. And I also know that my team, my leadership is going to support that and back me up on that lesson so that I can grow from it. Then I think what happens is people are more willing to take that risk. And maybe it's not a big risk. Maybe they're willing to take smaller risks. Maybe they're willing to grow. Maybe they're willing to learn. Maybe they're willing to communicate in a way that they wouldn't otherwise if you allow that culture of trusting people to do the best they can with what they've got.
Right. Again, it's that cultural issue. It always comes back to the cultural issues.
Always got to bring it
every
up.
time. But if you allow people to learn from their mistakes and move on and not just end their role there on the team then and there, then people are going to be more willing to take risks and try things. I mean, the whole purpose in management, and my view when I was a project manager, was gather the best, most accurate data so that they can then make a decision. And then look, there's advantages to moving fast for most organizations. I mean, there are some projects where we say, hey, we've got all the time, like we're driving this, let's just take our time and do it the right way. Great. That's not usually in the information technology world. I've never seen it there. But being able to make decisions based off the best information you have, to some degree, like there's a percentage of confidence in a decision. And in fact, I've worked at a couple of places where they had those discussions where we talk about percentage confidence on something. We realized, I said, I'm like 70% confident that this is the right thing. It's like, all right, there's that 30%. And it was a great way to discuss it, where a week later said, okay, I'm 60% confident. I was like, well, what happened? Well, here's why. I see this. We identified this risk and something that we hadn't thought about before that's now in the plan. But you're doing that transparently. And so then it's not about the individual. If it went wrong, it was never about that director who, it was, look, we took an educated guess, a guesstimate, a professional guesstimate, and we were incorrect, or there's something that we didn't see. Again, I'm not being optimistic. Like, this is where the reality has shifted to here. Here's the best way to move forward with the data we have now. Let's go.
Yep.
Why dwell on what went wrong, and let's focus. I know that's slightly different than like this topic, but it's when you have that approach, when you have the methodology, it develops the culture so that people are automatically accountable. It's less about the defensiveness. They don't feel attacked for that. They say, yeah, this is what it was. Yeah, we made this decision. Yeah, we were off on this. Here's how we're adjusting. Here's the new plan to go forward.
Do we have failing forward as a topic? I don't remember that one.
Failing forward. I don't think so either.
That would be a good topic.
Failing. Yes. My little trusty folks, as you see, like notepad with topics that Sharon and I've added. We're going into May of next year of clearly defined. We're going to there's no end to the discussions, but this is a real world conversational project management topic. So
I think if there's one nugget out of this last section, though, that I would really want to highlight for our viewers, it's when we talk about, what goes wrong and what you're doing wrong, and project failure files is all about, like, how can we do the right thing? I think the nugget out of this is really, like you say, a job has to be treated clinically, and those decisions have to be made without emotions involved. And often emotions are involved, but I think if there's one nugget out of that, it's when you're keeping track of agreements or decisions or, tasks that you're doing, like, try to make that as unemotional as possible and try to say, this is just the stuff that needs to be done. This is the stuff that happened. This is the stuff we're going to do, so that later on, when you go back and you revisit those decisions, your emotions are going to shift through the course of any project or any job or whatever, but the decisions themselves, the notes themselves, the information itself can stay consistent throughout all of that, no matter what's happening, no matter who's involved. I just think, the wrong thing to do is to depend on your own memory or feelings at the time and not have documented the actual information.
The one thing I would add to this, and I was just thinking of, again, a past manager who was excellent at operations, that understood process and structure and the documentation and all of that, was really good at that, but failed then on the human part of it. The fact that we sometimes slip up and documenting something or following this because there's an urgency, and I was working with this other person over in this division, this other stakeholder, and we needed to move quick, needed a quick decision. We had it, so we did it on the fly, like right there. Am I having to go back and do documentation around those kind of situations? Like, you should, yes, But again, if there's something that then goes wrong and you're going back and you're auditing the process, you have to remember that humans, people are fallible. They make mistakes. They forget something, like a step on something or other. There has to be a bit of mercy in this process as well. Mm-hmm. That look, we're doing the best we can. And there's incompetence. There are people that are beyond their skill set, their capabilities. They're stretched too far. They're in the wrong role. All valid things. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, if you are, I learned this early on, Sharon, too. I know you follow this, like you hire the best you can, the best people that you can find for that role and what you can afford to pay them and all those kinds of things. And you should take more time in the hiring process to find the right people, mm-hmm. and then give them more grace on the back end once they're in there. If you find good people, they're smart people, it's easier. I'll put my marketing hat on. It's easier to keep a customer than it is to find a customer.
Yeah, I definitely look for aptitude and attitude. Those are my two things that I really care about. Because I feel like if people are capable of doing something and have the willingness to continue to try, the rest of it, you can work with and you can coach. But yeah, I think part of it is just trusting your people as far as you can and giving them the grace to be human.
Yeah. So kind of some takeaways here to wrap up on this. It's a lot of this. If you're too heavy in the bureaucracy, if you're too heavy in the documentation, i.e. a low trust organization, it can really hinder collaboration. It makes it so that teams don't want to work together. Certain managers don't want to work together. Again, by having the structure, it makes it faceless. It makes it nameless. It's just, here is the culture. We do these things around our documentation and decision making. And so you just make it part of the culture. It will increase trust. So maintain clear records of all decisions. It protects the individuals. It protects the project success and the management. And it allows you to be more clinical and professional in how you handle conflicts.
Yeah, I think the more, like you said, the more information you've got, the clearer it is, the more transparent it is, the easier.
The less drama.
The less drama. Yeah, nobody wants drama.
No, nobody. We hate drama as humans. Come on. Yeah. So I would say, like, I like having a call to action for folks at the end of these things. Like, what can I actually go and do? One is to evaluate your current documentation practices and make adjustments. Make sure it's like, how could I go back and audit this? If a mistake is made, or if I need to go back and see who made a decision, what are the decision points? Where were those? Are they dated? Is it just an email discovery?
How old are they?
Yeah. And then really be as transparent as you can. That's something that if it's locked down and people are hoarding project details, like, that's bad. It needs to be transparent so you can hold people accountable, and use it as a tool for clarity, not just protection, and certainly not to go and attack people. Just clarify roles. That's a great, it sounds more passive aggressive, but to go and be like, Sharon, like, what was the decision on this point? Like, what, can you send me the email so I have it documented? Like, that's the language I would use. I said, I just want to make sure I've got it documented that, yeah, you were okay with this, so I can move forward with this. Because I can't move forward unless, someone above my pay grade makes a decision. And people are like, yeah, that's fine. Okay. And if you weren't comfortable, you say, oh, we need to go to the VP, or, whatever it is.
I really love the little approved GIF. Anytime anybody in my organization comes to me and says, hey, Sharon, is this good? I'm like, approved.
I wonder if a thumbs up, no words, but a thumbs up on an email response would stand up in court as an approval. Gave me a thumbs up. Where you just I was just acknowledging receipt of, like, I don't know.
Might be a tricky one. I don't use thumbs up for approvals. I try to be really clear.
Right.
Either say it, spell it, or have a GIF for it.
What sane person would use I'm insulting somebody out there, I'm sure. But again,
that's our system, Christian.
Well, but if it's part of the culture, if it's built in, like, hey, maybe that is the way that you do that. But
Yeah.
not in any organization I've ever worked for. Well, I guess that's we'll wrap at that point. It's been a great discussion, as
Yeah.
always.
Yeah. Make sure to CYA.
Of course, and as part of the CYA, make sure that we're going to audit this, that you are following us out on the socials wherever we are. If you do want to find past episodes, you can find everything out on the Tube of Views under Buckley Planet. If you look for Sharon or my names, you'll find all this content out there. And then, of course, please go over to projectfailurefiles.com, sign up for the newsletter. And yeah, we'll be back next Monday. Every Monday. I keep saying that. It's every Monday, folks. Rain or shine, holiday or not. It's happening every Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific. You'll find us with a new episode. And yeah, that's it. See you later.
Bye-bye. Bye.